Here he is again, the imposter Yannick Pelletier, replacing your favorite Daniel King for this broadcast video on Vikensee. The 9th round has been played today, and there was a game which everyone was looking forward to following. This is the one between Alireza Firouzja and Magnus Carlsen. Firouzja so far in the event clearly impressive, with 5.5 out of 8, sharing the first place with Fabiano Caruana so far, with brilliant chess, sparkling ideas. Magnus Carlsen had a slow start with many draws, 7 draws in a row, but then in the 8th round, before the free day, he managed to clinch victory. And I think this game against Firouzja clearly came at the right moment for the world champion, who is playing with black. Yet there have been many people, specialists around the chess world, claiming that Firouzja was potentially his successor. He was going to be perhaps a world champion within 5-6 years. And when other people try to take your own crown, you certainly feel a little bit tickled, and I think Magnus Carlsen wanted to make a point in this game. Well, let's see how it all went. And Firouzja with white started with e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5 and knight f6. You notice it, Carlsen is not going for his favorite Sicilian of the past year. He's coming back to his old Berlin, one of his favorite openings of the past. The Berlin, let's say that this choice is a rather chess psychology from his part, because Firouzja is a young player, clearly a great tactician, and might perhaps not be yet as experienced in positions with a closed pawn structure, with more strategic features. And this is clearly the ground where Carlsen wanted to take his opponent on this day. Well, who says Berlin says potentially the Berlin endgame, starting with castle, knight takes e4, but Firouzja didn't want to know anything about it. He went for d3, the closed Berlin, or a rather more fighting way to tackle the Berlin, as generally seen. And another interesting decision in this moment by Carlsen, who has played bishop c5 on many occasions in world championship matches and against most top players, and this is also recognized as the main move here against d3. But in this game he chose d6, and clearly he wanted to bring the game in a more closed and again strategic, less forcing character. Let's go through the next moves. c3, a6, bishop a4, bishop e7, castle, castle, rook e1, rook e8. Not too much to comment on here. Both players are developing their pieces normally for a Ruy Lopez type of position. Knight bd2, bishop f8 first, h3, b5, bishop c2 and bishop b7. Well, this position with the move, or let's say with this pawn d3 on d4 already, would be kind of a main line, more or less, of a very similar, the typical classical Ruy Lopez, where white plays d2, d4 in one move. Here white hasn't done so yet. The pawn is still on d3, and I think it would probably have been slightly wiser by Firouzja to go first knight f1, making sure that he is going to finish his development, prepare his position carefully before going d4. So what I mean is knight f1, knight g3 is gonna come. This bishop could be developed to g5, although it can also stay for a while on c1, and you can think of moves like a4 and also d4, but only after having put the knight on g3, because we're gonna see in the game that White's move d4, that's what he played, will cause some disruption in his development, or perhaps his peace or harmony. And you know, when you do things like this, I mean, it might not feel too much, but for Carlsen it's already something where he feels, all right, White's position isn't completely harmonious, how can I try to take advantage of this? And okay, he plays g6, and in a way I think Firouzja handled this whole phase of the game rather inconsistently. You know, he decided to play d5, but first he kind of hesitated and played a3. Well, there is a reason for that. I mean, he would probably like to play knight f1. That's the concrete reason. He would like to play knight f1 and next knight g3, but after e takes d4, c takes d4, there is knight b4, hitting the pawn here, and after knight g3 I can simply take the bishop and black is fine, perhaps even better. So that certainly is not satisfactory for White. So he kind of plays a3 to prepare for this, but we're going to see that this is not optimal. And if he wanted to play d5, as he did later in the game very soon, he should have played it immediately. d5, the knight goes, I guess, to b8, and now a4. And it does not allow black to get the same kind of counterplay as in the game. Here a4, knight bd7, I guess black is alright here, but White also has his play and certainly ideas on how to exert perhaps some pressure as well. So I would say here the position is rather balanced. But after a3 here, Carlsen played this clever knight b8, which is nothing, you know, fantastic. I mean, it's a typical move in the Ruy Lopez. By playing knight b8, you increase the pressure here on e4, again prevent knight f1 because I could take, and then this pawn is hanging. Yet I think that, as I said, the inconsistent way with which Firouzja treated this part of the game showed again, because he decided to close the center now, and I think perhaps it was not the right moment either. It would have been better earlier, and now it's not the right timing. So perhaps a move like b4 would be better, you know, trying to play knight b2, bishop b2, and later c4. I mean, black is alright, obviously, but I think that White's play would be slightly easier to play here. White's position would be easier to play. Then in the game, after d5, Carlsen immediately took the center under fire with c6, c4, and there is immediate tension created here with the pawns, and it's not quite easy. I mean, at the moment, White's pawn center isn't really in danger, but these tensions are here, and White always has to be careful about that. And Carlsen played easy moves, knight bd7, a4, queen c7, and b3. Well, White is clearly trying to hold these pawns on c4 and d5, making sure that his pawn chain is going to remain in place. But it is pretty passive, and again, the lack, or let's say the slightly delay in development which White is suffering at the moment, I'm thinking especially of these two bishops here, doesn't make it too easy. And actually the time consumption here is already quite a clear sign that Firouzja wasn't feeling well. For b3 he spent 23, slightly more than 23 minutes. Earlier also to play a3 and d5 he took quite a lot of time, meaning he didn't really feel so comfortable. And well, Carlsen here, rook ec8, very logical. He's now threatening things along the d file. Well, there would be actually a nice regrouping of pieces for White if he could only play bishop d3, well, along the way exerting some pressure on b5 and perhaps then retreat the bishop to f1, maybe his position would be alright. The problem is after bishop d3 there is c takes d5. And if you play c takes d5, which is the move you like to play from a strategic point of view, then there is queen c3 and 2 pieces hanging. Oh, black is winning here. So Firouzja played the slightly awkward rook a2, and here Carlsen took the advantage. I mean, he's already better here, but he increased somehow his advantage with simple means. B takes c4, b takes c4, and a5. He's going to improve the position of his pieces steadily, and white can't really do anything about it. Again, if he tries bishop d3, knight c5 goes back to f1, and fortunately for him there is c takes d5, and again a concrete refutation. Knight c5 takes e4, and you can see again a lack of harmony in the pieces, and white pieces, I mean the rook on a2 should be kind of holding something, but it's not, and here black is more or less winning already. So he played knight f1, bishop a6, hitting c4, knight e3. And these pieces, again, I want to stress that, I mean, I might be repeating myself, but these pieces, they do not collaborate, they do not coordinate, and when you have such a problem in your position, then clearly something is wrong, and you might bail out against lesser opponents, but not against the world champion, and Carlsen will punish this in a merciless fashion. Knight c5. Well, if you take on c6 and play knight d5, perhaps an objectively better choice, although I don't really like it. Now there is knight cd7, just holding the knight, and pressure being put again on the pawn on c4, which is definitely very weak. So knight d2 makes sense, but c takes d5, c takes d5, rook a b8, and look at all the pieces, all black's pieces are placed harmoniously here. Both open files controlled and under full control actually of the black rooks and heavy pieces. Light pieces are placed well. I mean, look at even the bishop f8, you can say, is soon going to come out to h6, that's clear. And white's pieces are in a mess. I mean, there is clearly a traffic jam here. Bishop a3, queen d8, queen f3, h5, rook a1. Well, he has a plan. We're going to see that. Rook a b1. Rook takes b1, rook takes b1, and king g7. You see, these moves by Carlsen, I mean, they are easy. They're not, it's not sparkling chess. I mean, one would even say you don't need to be the world champion to play these moves. But it's not just the moves one by one. It's a whole that you're taking, and the whole strategy by Carlsen is easy, healthy, and with these simple moves, he has clearly outplayed his young, talented opponent. I think the only difficult, because these last moves by black were not so difficult, but I think difficult point which will come inevitably for black in such situations is to feel when the moment for concrete action comes. And first you have to feel that moment, and second you need to be at the right level, that is calculate precisely, and sometimes quite long variations. So for even lesser GMs like me, this is often a problem. I play good moves, I build up my advantage, and then it's not strategic anymore, it becomes tactic. You need to feel the moment, and that's where we falter often. Well, it's not the case with Carlsen and others, and that's why it's also quite instructive to see how the game unfolds until its end. Knight e f1, h4, knight e3, bishop f4, knight f1. Clearly waiting for events to come, not weakening his position any further. I mean, it looks a little strange to play like this, but he's not playing bad moves, and that's important. He makes sure his position is not falling apart. Queen c7, g3. Well, that's already a decision which is a little bit more tricky because he weakens his king's position. Takes, bishop h6, h4. Well, here the computer indicates queen a7 as even stronger than the game. King g2 and knight e6. Well, that's not an easy move to spot, but it's not impossible either. I mean, there is logic in that. The rook wants to come here and the knight wants to go there. I mean, that's a combination. You combine two ideas, you make it work. And here black is winning after d takes e6 and rook takes c2. With all pieces just in crossfire here. He went queen d7 instead, which is pretty strong as well. King g2, took on a4, took here, bishop takes d6. Now, as you can feel, certainly, it's getting concrete. I've taken a4, you've taken d6, e5's hanging, pieces are hanging. So you need to make sure your calculation is accurate. Queen d4, queen f2, takes, and in this position, well, Carlsen decided to take on f1 with the bishop. I've read on the web, on the net, after this that, well, bishop takes f1 is not the most accurate. Carlsen made a mistake here, and Firouzja resigned. He could have played on. Well, actually, as we're going to see, black is winning. Black is winning. It's clear Firouzja could and should have played on and tried to fight on a little bit. But basically, the outcome of the game is going to be clear. There was perhaps a move which can be considered slightly more accurate, perhaps slightly more convincing. It's knight g4 check. It's a check, you protect e5 at the same time, and the small trick, which certainly didn't pass unnoticed by both players, is king f3, rook c3 check. You can give up the knight because there is this cute mate with bishop c8 here. So instead of king f3, you have to go back to e1, which is pretty sad. Bishop d3, you cannot leave the first rank. Be careful of rook c1 check. So you gotta play something like rook a1, and you can play f6, and it's full domination. You still cannot take on a5. I mean, black is winning here. But he took on f1, and that's where Firouzja resigned, and we're gonna see why. I mean, there is a line which is, you can either take on e5 immediately or first take here. I mean, it's the same position here. We get this position where the computer claims here, when you don't let it go too far or too deep, it shows like -1, 150, which means it's not completely winning yet. But let's go on a little bit with the calculation. Well, bishop takes e5. Clearly there is a pin here. You want to play rook b6, eventually g4, g5, so you have no choice. Bishop c3. But bishop c3 is good enough. Now white has no choice either. He has to play rook c1, pinning the bishop. I take here, you take there. I take on e4. I'll have two pieces for a rook, 3 pawns each, and some problems for white because the a pawn is very dangerous. So you need to try something. And g3 is hanging, so let's go for g4 and just knight f6. I mean, easy moves, nothing special from the black side here. I'm sure Carlsen would have found this and played it very, very quickly. g5, knight takes d5, rook c5. Well, again, easy to spot that you're not losing a piece. Knight e3 check, king there, bishop d6, got a take here, and knight f5. And, well, yes, you could actually play until here, but now you can actually understand that white is losing another pawn. The h pawn is doomed. For instance, if you play rook a4, bishop g3, simply, or if you go h5, I have to check on g3 and I take on the next move. So, I mean, technically it's all over, and I think even here that doesn't really make sense to prolong the fight. So yes, the resignation by Firouzja slightly premature, but certainly not completely out of place, I would say. So, well, Magnus Carlsen showed who is the best, and thanks to this victory, he actually comes closer to the lead. All the remaining games today were all ended in a draw, including Caruana's game. Caruana is now the leader, sole leader in vacancy, 6 out of 9. There are 4 players with 5.5. Firouzja remaining in place. Carlsen jumping up the standings. There is also Jordan Van Forest and another American Whistler. So clearly the rest of the tournament is going to be extremely interesting. The next round is going to witness a certain Caruana against Firouzja, and Carlsen now is on the way up. He scored 2 victories in a row, and in the next round he's going to face Kovalev, who hasn't been really in good shape so far. So perhaps another chance for the world champion, perhaps to catch up with Caruana. We're going to see that. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm afraid you're going to see me another time during vacancy, but tomorrow Daniel King will be here for you again. Thanks a lot.